everyone, welcome back to Too Sweet MTG, welcome to another Commander video. Today we're talking about a recent change I've made to the way I build decks for Commander and how it's changed my enjoyment of the format for the better. The reset I've made is basically thinking about what I want to be doing when I play Commander. When I started playing Commander, I used to play once, maybe twice a week. As soon as I finished work on a Friday, I basically sprint to the game store to start playing. But, by God, that was a long time ago. Life gets in the way. That game store has moved. Because London is so expensive, and because of a bunch of other factors going on in our lives, me and my wife have had to move further out. On top of that, people just get busier as you get older. These things happen. I also play a lot more Cube than I used to. If you like Cube, check out our podcast, Powerful Nothing, links in the description below. But Cube kind of takes up what little competitive juices I really had beforehand. So that means when I'm playing Commander, I'm doing it to enjoy myself. The goal is to have fun. And because I don't get to play as many games, making sure in the games I do play that my deck does the thing as much as possible is really important. The worst thing for me now would be that when I get to play Commander, I'm sat there mana screwed, or not having enough mana to cast my spells, or not having enough things to do. Even to an extent, only having one thing to do on my turn, like on turn 8 where everyone is doing these cool, crazy turns, just having one spell to cast isn't exciting to me anymore. I want choices, I want to be involved. If I've left my house to play Commander, I actually want to play Commander. Another time I also get to play Commander is when we do gameplay videos on the channel, which is something we're going to be doing again in the future in the coming months. When doing research on how we can improve those videos, one thing that came up was how the Command Zone build decks for game nights. Like with most creators, they have their deck skeletons. I have one I use on this channel. It's how everyone starts their decks off so they know at a base level when they are building the deck that it will work in the end. For game night, they use a slightly different set skeleton to their normal videos because they are aiming for entertaining games where decks have the best chance to showcase what they are doing. Now that kind of sounds like exactly what I'm after, so I've taken that template and made some adjustments to it, and this is how I'm building my own personal decks going forward. For transparency, I'll put a link down to that episode of the Command Zone in the description below if you want to check that out as well. But next I'm going to be going over what it actually means when putting a deck together like this, where the aim isn't raw power level, the aim is fun. I don't think this is the way to build the strongest deck out there. I think this is the best way to build a fun, consistent deck. So let's start with some things that have stayed the same. Firstly, it's still important, like with any deck, to work out what the deck is actually doing. What is the point of the deck? Why are you building it? A good example of this is I did a deck recently for Rendmore. The point of that deck is to play cards with multiple types which trigger Rendmore and make an army of bird tokens that will kill our opponents. That brief informs so many things about the type of cards that we want to play in the deck. We know we need cards with multiple types. We know we're making tokens, so we can look at cards that care about that as well. No matter what you're building, this should always be the first place that you start. In terms of changes, a big one is cards that I'm just not playing anymore. This isn't a list of cards I don't think people should play. These are cards I am choosing not to play for a couple of reasons. The change I'm trying to make here is to have games that are more fun. That does include my opponents having fun too. And this is the biggest aspect of where this doesn't work if you're purely playing Commander to win. A choice I am making with this is not running cards that stop my opponents from doing things that their deck wants to do. At a base level, this means not running counterspells with the purpose of stopping my opponents from doing their thing. If you're playing competitively, do not do this. This is entirely if you're playing for fun. But importantly, I'm not just cutting the counter magic and leaving it there. I am adding more targeted removal, so I can still answer my opponent's threats, but there is still the opportunity for my opponent to do the thing their deck is trying to do first before I get the chance to answer it. Another great example of this is I'm not going to run cards that sit there and passively turn off people's decks. Take a card like Rest in Peace, for example. This can just make a graveyard deck sit there, not able to do anything for days. That is arguably not fun, but it doesn't mean I'm going to let the graveyard player do what they want. Again, I'm still going to run a bunch of interaction. So I could run a Rakdos Charm, for example, which has the ability to exile a player's graveyard. Or I could run a good old Bojuka Bog. But the point is that the player has had a chance for their deck to do their thing, and could potentially rebuild afterwards. I'm not just shutting someone down for a whole game of Commander. There's a ton of cards like this that can just shut off players' decks. Repeatable Edict effects like Grave Pact can just hose whole creature decks. Winter Orb just sits there and hoses every deck, and is actually a good example of another type of card that I'm not going to be running. And that is cards that drag out games of Commander and make them longer. These come in a couple of different types. First are cards that put hard locks on the game. As we've mentioned, we have cards like Winter Orb, but also you have things like Stasis, and effects that only let a player cast one spell a turn. These all drag out a game longer than it needs to be, and means people are less likely to be enjoying themselves. Another way of stopping games going long is choosing to not run cards with repeatable, annoying effects that you have to constantly check on people with. You will know what I'm talking about. There is no way in hell I'm running Ristic Study in any of these decks. Having to stop the game every time someone does anything is not fun, and that's not what we're building towards. I'm also choosing not to run tutors or 2-card combos. I find it more fun to draw the cards from my deck. It adds way more replayability to the deck because you're not just tutoring for the best card every game, or you're not just tutoring for a 2-card combo to end the game. If I want some convoluted engine that can end the game, I'm here for that. My choice to not run 2-card combos is basically because it can lead to people feeling that it didn't really matter what they were doing up to that point. It didn't matter how much they attacked, or if their deck did their thing. If you get 2 cards together, the game just ends. It's kind of a bit of a flat feeling. Another thing I wanted to do with this update is to cut down on overly complicated cards. This is something Game Nights mentioned they do as a way of helping with editing, which as someone who edits their own gameplay videos, I really get. But also, I've said this a bunch, Magic has got so complicated over the last couple of years, it's almost impossible to keep track of what all the new Commander cards do. Being honest, I play Commander in the pub, or I play Commander on camera. These are both situations where I'm likely not going to be playing at my peak. This means I'm looking to run simpler versions of effects, like not playing the version of a card with random 2023 set mechanic attached to it, or not adding things like Daybound or Nightbound, or the initiative to a game if I don't need them. Another example of keeping things simple is not running full art cards that don't have all the rules text printed on them. I don't want to be having to look up on Scryfall what a card actually does. The next thing to touch on is the change I've made to the skeleton I use to make the deck. I put my normal skeleton on screen here, and the updated one next to it. The biggest change on how I'm building these decks is that there's now a lot more card draw, there's a lot more ramp, and there's a lot more targeted removal. What this change has done is it means I'm now able to do more things on a turn. I have more choices. By upping these numbers, it means I'm way more likely to be ramping early in the game, and importantly, hitting my land drops every turn. It also means I'm more likely to have something to answer an opponent's threat when I need to. Having more ramp and targeted removal naturally means I'm more likely to be able to do those things, but really pushing the card draw is what really ties this all together. By having a ton more card draw, I'm able to see more cards throughout a game. I have more choices. By seeing more ramp and more lands, I always have the ability to do things on my turns. I always have the mana for it. The card draw then also draws us into the other parts of the deck as well. On the topic of the other parts of the decks, those are the parts where we are having to make room for the additional draw, ramp and interaction from. When I first saw this, I was a little mortified. I thought this just has to suck. You have so much less room for your actual deck available to you. Basically, I found that to not be the case. What it does is it makes you look harder for effects that overlap and can go in multiple sections. It makes you focus the deck more. It makes that goal that you started with more important, as now all the points in the deck are pointing towards it. The next change that I'm making is I'm also really trying to lower the curve of my decks. I know Commander is the format where you can do the big, dumb, broken things, and I'm not taking that out of my decks, but I'm limiting the amount of higher costed spells that my decks do have. One of the things with all the ramp, card draw, and targeted removal that I'm adding is that the bulk of this is going to be around 2 mana. While I'm not running some effects because of play pattern, I'm still trying to run as efficient bits of ramp, removal, and card draw as possible. If you just look at that set skeleton, it means that at least half of our non-land cards in our deck mostly cost around 2 mana. That is just such a good place to start off your curve, it's amazing. The benefits of having a lower curve are that you get to do multiple things in a turn. You're more likely to be able to double, or even triple spell later in the game. That is what I want to be doing. I want to be more involved in a game. It doesn't mean you can't run 8 drops. It means that when you're being more curve conscious, you might run a couple of large drops as your top end, but everything else is cheaper. Often, a lot of times where I've struggled with casting multiple spells in a turn isn't because I've had multiple 8 drops in my deck, it's by having too many 4 or 5 drops in my deck. How I'm looking at a curve now is the largest section is in 2 drops, the second biggest is in 1 and 3 drops, and then it tails off pretty quickly and they get less after that. So next you have 4s and then 5s until you end up with maybe 1 7 or 8 drop if you needed to run one. So, those are the changes. What has been the result of all of this? Well, being honest, I'm actually kind of stunned at the difference this has made to not just how the games I've played have changed, but also to my outlook on Commander as a whole. This has so dramatically changed my enjoyment of Commander for the better, I'm really surprised by it. The games I've played with these decks have been so much more enjoyable. They've worked exactly as I wanted them to. I've been involved in every game. I've had things to do. I've had a ton of options and lines available to me at all points in the game. For me, the games have been more interactive and more fun. I was a little worried going in that just me making a change to my decks, or my opponent still playing the decks they were playing beforehand, might mean that either my deck would be an outlier and the games wouldn't improve, or that from a power level point of view, the decks would just be way off from what my playgroup normally is. On both of those, I have found that not to be the case. In terms of fun games, I have been having a blast. My turns have been swingier, I've had more choices and more things to do. I've had a couple of games where one opponent has played some kind of lock piece, and the other 2 opponents do nothing or just pass. But I've either had an answer ready to go, or I've been easily able to dig to find that answer, and then I just continue with my turn as normal. I feel like with this plan, I am playing more Magic. I am doing more things, but it's not overly complicated. It's just more of what I want. My deck is doing its thing. From a power level point of view, I've also not found this to be an issue. My gut is that the overall top-line power level of a deck built this way is a little lower than a deck that would be fully optimized, but these builds have just been so much more consistent that it will probably average out in terms of things I actually do in a game to end up being pretty similar. The one downside I can see from some games I've played is that super synergistic decks could suffer a little because you have less synergy pieces in the deck. Like the Renmore deck I mentioned, that deck really needs effects that are on multiple types. When I built it for myself, I added more cards that I like. I think my first pass scrimped too much on those in favour of generic bits of ramp, card draw, and interaction. My updates to the deck I think will fix that, but it means that I have to go deeper on overlap cards in the ramp, in the card draw, and in the interaction section than I would do normally. To me as a deck builder, that's fine, as it means I need to think about the deck building more, and that's the part I like, so I'm fine with that. But I could see someone who just wants a deck that's more fun to play could maybe have an issue if you're trying to build a synergy deck in this style. Being conscious of having bits of synergy that you need is something a little bit more to be in mind of when building a deck like this. Like, am I an artifact deck? How many artifacts am I running? Am I a +1/+1 counters deck? Am I running enough cards that dish out those counters? You'll need to go a bit deeper in building to make sure those bits are there. You'll need to make sure this overlaps more within your deck. The other thing that's really surprised me is it's got me excited to build decks in paper again. I built like 5 decks in the past couple of weeks. I've not done that in absolute years. There's probably an aspect of new shiny toy, new challenge, that kind of thing, but I do think because I know I'm going to have more fun games on the other end with them, that is playing a big part of it too. Also, the types of decks I'm building are varying wildly as well. I built a humans deck, I built a theft deck, I built a spellslinger deck, I built the Renmore Delirium deck, and I've also built Dragonstorm. This skeleton does work for all the decks that I've tried it with, and because it's actually pretty quick and easy, I put these decks together really quickly as well. We're sort of coming towards the end now, and I guess I should address how this will affect videos and deck text going forward. For deck text on this channel, it won't affect them at all. I'm still going to give what I think is the most optimal version of a deck when I make a video on a commander, because at the end of the day, that's what I think someone clicking on a deck tech is after. But for decks I build myself and for gameplay videos on the channel, I'm going to be working with this new structure. I'm having fun, I'm going to continue doing so. I guess a good place to finish off here is, if this is something you're either interested in or not sure on, honestly, my recommendation is just build one deck with this skeleton. Make it out of cards you own. You could upgrade a precon or pick a commander that's interesting but not super powerful. Jam in a bunch more ramp, card draw, targeted removal, lower your curve and take out some of the miserable cards, and see how you find the games. My gut is that you will be impressed. Even if it's not how you build every deck, having one built this way is great for playing in pods where you're not really sure on the power level, because at a minimum, you'll be knowing your deck is going to be doing its cool thing. Alright, that's where we're going to leave it for today. Thank you all very much for watching. If you think of building a deck in this way, please consider using our TCG Player affiliate link, which you can find in the description below. It helps the channel grow, helps us do new and cool things. But until next time, please like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you all soon. Goodbye.